Good afternoon, and welcome again to the Stoner Report. I'm Marius Stoner, here at the BCMP Vapor Lounge, downtown in Vancouver, BC, 307 West Hastings. And I'm here again with another roundup of the week's news. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody who went to and organized 420 events throughout the world. Various cities had huge numbers. Colorado had its first legal 420, and despite that there was no outdoor smoking allowed, people did spark up at 420. So yeah, we had a great time here in Vancouver, even though there was a little bit of rain. We still had 30,000 people descend on downtown, the art gallery, which is more than we've ever had before. So congratulations to everybody who was there and helped with it. And yeah, happy 420, belatedly. Okay, I'm going to start with this week's news. And if you'll just give me a second here, I just got to organize this properly. There we go. There we are. Okay. Nanaimo grower is the first in Canada to issue recall for medical marijuana. In what's believed to be the first pot recall in Canada, Greenleaf Medicinals of Nanaimo is telling its clients not to smoke the Purple Kush. A Health Canada press release states that Greenleaf is voluntarily recalling one batch of marijuana, Purple Kush batch PK10-2013, produced for medical purposes. The recall is due to issues with the company's production practices, which were identified during an inspection by Health Canada and may impact the product. Customers who've purchased the product should not smoke it. Greenleaf Medicinals is instructing clients to immediately discontinue use of any marijuana from this shipment, which they may still have remaining in their possession, reads the release. The company has also informed Health Canada that they are presently working with other licensed producers to find a supply of marijuana for the impacted clients. Health Canada oversees the medical marijuana industry in consultation with physicians or nurses, which is a controlled legal business operating while under the government in Ottawa opposes moves to decriminalize or legalize marijuana. That's interesting. Thousands turned up for pot party in downtown Vancouver. Part carnival, part raucous marketplace, part political statement, 420 Vancouver has evolved into a celebration that epitomizes the marijuana movement. The annual event at the Vancouver Art Gallery attracted a crush of thousands of people Sunday who came to smoke pot, party, stand up for the legalization of recreational pot use in Canada, and sample the goods from dozens of booths that crowded the squares and cordoned off streets around the art gallery. Everything was for sale. T-shirts, posters, and towels emblazoned with the ubiquitous cannabis leaf, or Reggae King, and pot lord Bob Marley, as well as all manner of bongs and pipes. Marijuana itself was also for sale in endless forms, in cookies, brownies, popcorn, lollipops, banana bread, oil. You could buy seeds or bags or already rolled joints, 3 joints for $10. This was hawked loudly by the sellers pushing through the crowds. Everywhere was the acrid scent of pot, and a smoky haze hung over the crowd in the main square. Of course, you can go to cannabisculture.com and check out the tons of videos and some articles that Jeremiah has been putting up and looking for on the web for more 420 coverage. In the United States, a Florida student is at odds with school over a medical marijuana article. A Lakeland high school student is at odds with her school over an article on medical marijuana that she wants to write and include in a school publication. Channel 9 anchor George Esteves talked with the student and found out how she plans on fighting her cause. Abby Lane says she loves to contribute articles for her school magazine in Lakeland. The more you do a story, the more you know about that particular thing, Lane said. But her recent idea for Lakeland's high school magazine, The Bagpipe, on medicinal marijuana was turned down by her teacher. They said it would be inappropriate and unacceptable. More censorship. Oh, and I missed the picture of Lakeland High School for you guys. Sorry about that. Yay, Lakeland Senior High School. A California couple runs a medical marijuana shop to spread the gospel. A California couple claim that they own and operate a medical marijuana dispensary in order to help the sick and spread the gospel at the same time. Brian and Lynette Davies began selling marijuana out of their Canacare shop after claiming that God spoke to them. Now they consider themselves Sacramento's only evangelical medical cannabis provider. I started praying, "Please help me, Lord. I need to do something to be able to earn money." So he, God, said, "Open up a pot shop." "Who are you not to do my will?" said Brian, according to Time magazine. The Davies opened the medical marijuana shop with the intent of targeting men ages 20 to 30 because they'll spend the most on cannabis. 7 years later, the dispensary has gained a loyal clientele and serves as a vehicle to spread Christianity, according to Brian. "I've been coming here for 4 years and I'm a very satisfied customer," said Martina, reports Time. "You can't judge people for sinning differently than you. Weed was grown in the Garden of Eden, so it's nothing but God around here." In addition, the Davies place Bibles throughout the shop for customers to have, and each day they set aside time for shop employees to pray and include customers who want to join. Sacramento County tries to ban pot farms as medical weed business thrives. Citing marijuana fields springing up next to high schools and in abandoned barns, Sacramento County supervisors are set to declare pot gardens a public nuisance in the latest move by a local government to rein in California's cannabis industry. U.S. states are increasingly moving to drop curbs on marijuana following landmark voter initiatives in Colorado and Washington state in 2012 that legalized the drug for recreational use. But in California, where medical marijuana is legal but recreational use is not, state laws are hazy on who is allowed to grow and sell the drug, leading to a chaotic and largely unregulated marketplace of street corner pot dispensaries, illegal cannabis farms, and inappropriate prescribing by unethical doctors. Cities and counties have struggled to impose order on a piecemeal basis as states wrestle with developing a regulatory framework for the thriving, if messy, medical marijuana industry. A huge number of complaints were received last year from residents with regard to outdoor marijuana cultivation, said Sacramento County Supervisor Roberta McGlashan, who introduced the measure to ban marijuana gardens as a public nuisance. Many were close to schools, group homes, and other sensitive uses. The fields can also be dangerous as owners use weapons and dogs to guard their investments. 10 slayings currently under the prosecution in the county have been linked to attempted marijuana theft, she said. The U.S. Supreme Court rejects a Florida drug testing appeal. The U.S. Supreme Court Monday declined to review a lower court ruling that found Florida Governor Rick Scott's plan to randomly drug test state employees unconstitutional. The decision by the nation's highest court means that the ruling by the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals finding the plan unconstitutional stands. The drug test-happy governor had issued an executive order in March 2011 directing all state agencies to drug test new hires and randomly test current employees. But that order was challenged by the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Council 79, representing state workers. The union argued that random drug testing was a violation of the Fourth Amendment's prescription against unreasonable search and seizures. In its decision, the 11th Circuit generally agreed with the union, finding the suspicionless drug testing unconstitutional, but also ordered the state and the union to determine which state employees could be subjected to such testing. The legal prescription on drug testing state employees is not complete. There are exceptions for some public safety and law enforcement workers. But Governor Scott's ambitious plan to foist drug testing on all state workers without cause has been squashed. Obama may grant clemency to thousands of convicted drug violations. The Obama administration continues to roll back oppressive sentences for those with nonviolent drug convictions. An unnamed White House official has told Yahoo News that President Barack Obama is preparing to grant clemency to hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people who have been imprisoned for nonviolent drug violations. This news comes a few months after the administration's announcement that it has encouraged defense attorneys to suggest inmates who should be considered for early release from prison. This indicates that the Obama administration will continue in its efforts to curtail severe penalties in low-level drug cases. Late last year, President Obama commuted the sentences of 9 people serving time in federal prison for nonviolent offenses, including crack cocaine, saying that they had been sentenced under an unfair system. There is a huge disparity in sentences handed down between crack and powder cocaine offenses. This has been reduced somewhat by the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010, which brought a long-sought reduction in the penalties for crack cocaine. The earlier sentencing guidelines, enacted in 1986 at the peak of the panic over crack, set a 5-year minimum sentence for possession of 5 grams of crack, then worth about $500. Meanwhile, the same penalty applied to those convicted for a half kilogram of powder cocaine, which had the street value of more than $8,000. The results were that federal prosecutors primarily went after small-time dealers and users. Back in 2005, about 55% of the federal crack cocaine defendants were street dealers. The Fair Sentencing Act raised the quality of crack needed to trigger the 5-year minimum from 5 grams to an ounce, and its guidance applies retroactively for many of those already convicted. Yet only about half of the 24,000 federal prisoners serving time for crack cocaine offenses were eligible to have their sentences reduced. As the drug war rages, tweets reveal Mexicans' emotional numbness. Tweets from citizens on the front lines of the country's conflicts with drug cartels indicate desensitization to the growing violence. As Mexican drug cartels have grown in power over the past several years, their ascent has sparked a sharp increase in murders and kidnappings. The physical toll in several areas of the country is staggering. An estimated 100,000 people are dead or missing, caught up in fighting among the cartels, government forces, and recently formed paramilitary groups trying to control the drug gangs in regions where local police have proved ineffective. The emotional impact of the prolonged violence is more difficult to quantify, a situation worsened by the targeted violence against many of the country's news outlets reporting on the drug war. A team of researchers seeking to better understand the mental state of Mexicans exposed to the ongoing conflict has turned to social media as an end run around the country's embattled mainstream media. Their findings indicate a growing level of desensitization to the violence among a certain segment of the population, in this case users of the microblogging service Twitter. Mexicans who wanted to report their experiences initially turned to social media to circumvent a state-imposed media blackout designed to mask the country's problems to the rest of the world, says Andre Monroy Hernandez, a researcher in Microsoft's Research Fuse Labs. I found I was getting more information from Twitter about what was really happening than I was from newspapers and TV news, he adds. Monroe Hernandez, along with colleagues at Microsoft and the University of California, Irvine, have been covering Twitter's rise as a reporting tool in war-torn regions of Mexico for the past few years. A 2012 study with fellow Microsoft researchers entitled Nacro Tweets, Social Media in Wartime, analyzed Mexican microblogging as an alternative to newspapers and TV stations unwilling or unable to portray actual conditions in the country. A second paper, The New War Correspondence, The Rise of Civic Media Curation in Urban Warfare, followed last year and focused on citizen curators who had taken to aggregating and disseminating crucial information to Mexican citizens via social media. They warned locals to avoid certain dangerous areas during the daily travel to and from work, for example. Frequent cannabis consumers are less likely to engage in problematic alcohol use. Investigators analyzed data from a nationwide survey on alcohol and drug use. Those who report consuming cannabis 2 or 3 times per week are less likely to engage in at-risk drinking behavior, according to data published online in the American Journal of Addictions. Investigators from Sweden's Lund University, Department of Clinical Sciences, analyzed data from a nationwide survey on alcohol and drug use conducted by the National Institute of Public Health. Over 22,000 respondents between the ages of 15 and 64 participated in the survey. Now we'll just pause that for a second. So it's 2:20 here in Vancouver. Happy 4:20 to the people in the Central and Mountain time zone. We'll just briefly have a joint here. Got one rolled and ready to go. I'd like to say thanks again for everybody who went to 420, and don't forget that in a couple of weeks, the first Saturday of May, I'm not sure, I think it's the 3rd, is going to be the Million Marijuana March. So some cities have bigger than others. We have a little smaller turnout than we do for our 420 or Cannabis Days. And don't forget that Cannabis Day is also coming for those of you in Canada who celebrate. It'll be at the Art Gallery again this year. So if you're an activist in Vancouver, definitely come down for the Million Marijuana March. And if you like big crowds, rather, come down for Cannabis Day. Yeah. We always have lots of fun. We've been pretty lucky for the weather. We haven't really been rained out. We thought we were going to get rained out 420, like I said, but it didn't actually happen. And today is getting quite sunny and warm, so you know our springtimes here are kind of a hit and miss in Vancouver, but it's a good day today. And I'm not sure what I'm smoking here. This is something I got from my friends on the island. Big shout out to Shad and Ashley. Thank you so much. All right. That is the 2:20 break. We'll go back to the story. Researchers reported that frequent cannabis consumers, defined as having used cannabis 2 or 3 times per week, were less likely to engage in hazardous drinking practices compared to infrequent users, those who reported having consumed cannabis fewer than 4 times per month. They concluded, in the present study, it has been shown that, in the Swedish general population, cannabis use is associated with a higher prevalence of other illicit drug use and hazardous alcohol use. Among cannabis users, frequent cannabis use is associated with a higher prevalence of other illicit drug use and a lower prevalence of hazardous alcohol use when compared to occasional cannabis use. The inverse relationship between the frequency of cannabis use and hazardous drinking has not been reported before to our knowledge. This may indicate that cannabis users and alcohol users are different groups, albeit with higher degree of overlap between the groups, with different characteristics and clinical needs. Yes, well, again, I'd like to say, duh. How a marijuana study can poke holes in your brain. Casual marijuana use may be associated with brain abnormalities in developing brains. It may even cause some of the changes, but thanks to a bungling of study that grabbed headlines last week, we aren't all that much closer to knowing. The study, Cannabis use is quantitatively associated with nucleus accumbens and amygdala abnormalities in young adult recreational users, was widely reported as being the first study that has found there are brain abnormalities in casual users, as I put in Motherboard's coverage. I also noted that casual is pretty vague adjective, and we'll see in a moment. The study's lead author, Hans Breiter, issued the study as a reason to say we should reconsider legalizing marijuana and shouldn't allow anybody under the age of 30 to use pot. Anne Blood, another researcher, said that the study could indicate that the experience with marijuana alters the brain organization and may produce changes in function and behavior. I've already reached out to the scientists and press officers involved in this study and will update when I hear back. People think a little recreational use shouldn't cause a problem. If someone is doing okay with work or school, Breiter said in a Northwestern release regarding the research, our data directly says that this is not the case, except, as has since been pointed out, it doesn't. The main problems with the study, according to people who have pushed back, is its small sample size, 20 college students. Its definition of casual, the average study participated smoked 11 joints a week, the fact that most of the weed smokers were also drinkers, and the fact that only one MRI scan was done for each participant, which is not ideal. So, if you're going to try to prove that marijuana is harmful to people, keep at it. Good luck. The case for hemp. Over the course of the past several decades, 420 has become a symbol for Weed Day, where the designation comes from is as hazy as smoke. Hundreds of thousands of pot aficionados will bask in the country as they celebrate the recent progress in legalizing pot across America. Some believe that it is designated hour for tea time in Amsterdam, the unofficial capital of cannabis. David Malmoline will tell you that it was some students in California, but I'm not sure if he can prove that either. Others say it's the number of active chemicals in marijuana. Well, an even more elaborate explanation is that 420 is the number in a Bob Dylan song, Rainy Day, number 12 and 35, multiplied together. Whatever the origins, April 20th has grown to the pop cultural phenomenon it is today for a simple reason. 420 is a youth-driven counterculture rebellion in protest to marijuana being illegal. During the period of free love, peace, and rock and roll in the 60s and 70s, marijuana was ubiquitous at concert, universities, and festivals around the country. But as the hippie culture waned, marijuana became demonized as political culture grew more conservative and a tough-on-crime reaction to political and cultural unrest from decades prior took hold. Although marijuana had already been technically illegal since 1937, in the early 80s, the Reagan administration passed the Three Strikes Law, the toughest national laws and sentencing guidelines ever against marijuana growers, users, and distributors. Public opinion towards marijuana has drastically soured, and suddenly the possession of hemp, or cannabis, was a major federal crime. While critics have long argued the new Three Strikes laws were harsh and unjust punishment, they also had another major unfortunate impact. The laws crippled the burgeoning use of hemp for commercial purposes in the U.S. So that's kind of an intro to that issue, rather than an actual explanation. But it does go on and elaborate the uses of hemp and why it should be legalized. And finally, Martin Sheen reprises his West Wing role for a sentencing reform PSA. On Tuesday, Brave New Films released a new PSA calling on Congress to pass the Smarter Sentencing Act. The proposed sentencing reform legalization aims to reduce prison populations and costs by creating less severe minimum terms for nonviolent drug offenders. On Monday, Yahoo News reported that President Obama could grant clemency to hundreds, perhaps thousands, of nonviolent drug offenders at the end of his second term. The video was produced in partnership with the ACLU and Families Against Mandatory Minimums, and stars actor Martin Sheen. It's titled, "President Bartlett Has a Message for Congress," in reference to Sheen's role on Aaron Sorkin's political drama, The West Wing. So I'm going to just play you that video, and after that, I'll come back and say goodbye after that. So let's have a look at Martin Sheen's video.
Congress is considering sentencing reform that would change how our system uses mandatory minimums. A basic principle of justice is that the punishment should fit the crime. Mandatory minimums undermine that principle by forcing judges to ignore individual circumstances.
I've known of judges, federal, state, are literally in tears because they know that this sentence is inappropriate, but they have to follow the law, and so they would apologize to people, but as they're sending them to prison for 10 years, they know full well it really shouldn't even be a prison sentence, but that's what the law requires. No one can in advance decide a reasonable sentence without knowing what the circumstances were. You can't do that reasonably, so you need to have judges with discretion to be able to make those decisions.
The United States now has a higher percentage of its people behind bars than any country on earth.
Just the number of people that are incarcerated in the United States is appalling. It's an embarrassment that we would put that many people into an incarceration environment.
Some studies suggest that up to 40% of the people who are incarcerated in America, they're not a threat to public safety, they're not a threat of flight. Why are they in jail?
In Texas, that we went from about an 84,000 bed prison system and built to 150,000. Well, all we did was fill the 150,000 beds and the crime rate stayed the same. We weren't making the society that we live in any better. We were just simply jacking the taxpayers out of a whole lot more money.
There have been successful reforms on the state level that we could implement nationwide.
The crime rate in Texas dropped 8.45%. The incarceration rate dropped 1.45%. The legislature was set to build 2 new prisons. So they were expecting to add 17,000 people. We didn't add those 17,000 people, and then we lowered it enough that they closed a prison. We've saved $2 billion. That's B as in big, 2 billion, not million, $2 billion, which is huge in a state budget.
It's time for elected officials to focus on solutions like flexible sentencing guidelines. Our goal must be a justice system that avoids unnecessary incarceration and irresponsible spending. Tell Congress to pass the Smarter Sentencing Act.
So yeah, that was really cool, eh? So thanks again for watching the Stoner Report. I'm Marius Stoner for Cannabis Culture News. Don't forget to stay tuned at 4 o'clock for Jeremiah's show. And check out our other stuff on Pot TV on YouTube at... you can go to www.pot.tv, or you can check out our YouTube channel. I think it's Pot TV Network. And yeah, Jody has a show, and Marijuana Man has a show, and Al the Alchemist has a show that's on Be Real. We get it most of the time. So yeah, stay tuned for all those shows. And until then, don't forget, Cannabis is the most advanced plant on the planet, and we're going to use it to save ourselves and save the world. Until next week, take care of yourselves. See you then.